So the American voting public has a new top issue, beating out healthcare, tourism, and the economy. Now the issue most people say they care about is immigration, according to a Harvard-Harris poll out last week, with 42% of registered voters saying that is their priority. And little wonder, with word from federal officials that mass ICE deportation raids could start any day now, which have resulted in protests around the nation. And then there are conditions at the border where detention facilities have been described by at least one observer as torture facilities, but which the president apparently considers an upgrade.
If you look, people that came from unbelievable poverty, that had no water, they had no anything, where they came from, those are people that are very happy with what's going on because, relatively speaking, they're in much better shape right now.
I'm joined now by two of the few people who have seen these conditions firsthand themselves, Congressman Joe Kennedy and Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. To both of you, thank you so much for being here. What was your, I know it's hard to just ask one, what was your primary takeaway from your visit, Congresswoman?
Just palpable trauma and fear. When we entered the cell, where maybe 20 women were being detained, Congressman Kennedy and Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez were able to communicate with the women in Spanish, and they seemed immediately relieved to be communicating in Spanish. And even though I don't speak Spanish, I knew what they were all saying.
And the thrust of which was?
Well, many of them immediately started crying. And first of all, El Paso, Texas, this is devastating heat, sweltering heat. And the women shared that they had been in tents just the day before. And so to me, it seemed that they had been moved indoors when they knew that Congress was coming, which is one of the reasons why we need to be able to go there without any notice or any forewarning. But the women were less concerned about their welfare and well-being and very concerned about where their children were. The women...
Did some not know where their children were?
Yes, some did not know. The oldest woman I met in there was 56. The youngest was probably 19. They had not showered in 15 days. And just so you know what we're dealing with, there was a medical professional there. And I said to him, these women haven't showered for 15 days. Do you see this as a human rights violation or a public health threat? And he said that was debatable, that it was certainly unsavory and unpleasant, but it was debatable as to whether or not it was a human rights violation or a threat to public health. That's what we're dealing with.
What was your takeaway, Congressman?
I think a couple things. One, this system has failed, and it needs a structural overhaul immediately. Two, CBP, from the very moment we got there, was resistant to us gaining access to individuals, information, tour, etc.
This is a dozen members of Congress.
A dozen members of Congress who, while they tried to limit what we could see and take our phones and limit who we could interact with, while we're there, obviously, almost immediately, a CBP, uniformed CBP member tried to sneak a selfie with Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez when we were there. And so the lack of professionalism kind of all the way through was troubling, to say the least. The other thing, Jim, just to be clear on this, the system itself is being forced to do things that the system was not designed to do. So it's a systemic failure. And two, a Trump administration has made this worse at every single level whenever they could. They have a chance. Meaning that, for instance, CBP could have come in, welcomed 12 or so members of Congress and say, you know what, the system is past the stress point. We welcome you here to get the story out, to force structural reform, to engage in a way that we need to address a humanitarian crisis for folks that are here seeking asylum. And instead, they tried to limit what we could gain access to so that when we gain entrance to a cell that Congresswoman Pressley mentioned, she went in, gave two members a hug, and they burst into tears immediately. Immediately. You don't have to speak Spanish to know that they were traumatized and just seeking any sort of clarification and answers.
Were you scared yourselves? I mean, this happened, your visit happened almost simultaneously with ProPublica's report about these grotesque Facebook posts from some current and former Border Patrol people, not only making light of migrant deaths, but also with an illustration about a vulgar sexual thing with Ocasio-Cortez and Donald Trump. Were you scared at all yourself?
I wasn't frightened, but it gave me great cause and concern that these are people charged with the welfare and the well-being of families, and in particular children. Before we went well, let me just tell the truth. I mean, we had to basically, we forced our way into a cell. I mean, again, they were trying to offer the most sanitized, filtered narrative of what happens there. Representative Ocasio-Cortez demanded that they open the door. The women were peeking out and singing. And then we backed her up. It was myself, Representative Dean, Representative Kennedy, myself, and Ocasio-Cortez, and I believe and Representative Castro. And we demanded that they open the cell, and they couldn't answer anything. I mean, again, to the stress point issue, these are people who have been there 56 some of them plus days. These are facilities that are meant to detain people for 72 hours. But to your point about fear, I wasn't afraid for myself, but it was clear that this is a culture that is corrupt, that is chaotic, that is calloused. And one of the women said she speaks 4 languages, including English, that she did not immediately let on that she does speak English, and that the guards used very derogatory, demoralizing, racist, sexist language in talking about the women, making fun of them.
I want to talk about the racist language. You know, I haven't been there, but I have to say from afar, the belief I have is that if they were, well, the president often talks about Norwegians. If they were Norwegians who crossed the borders or other white people, they wouldn't be treated like this. I know that's speculation, but
no, it's not speculation. That's facts, and that is a fact in my view.
Do you share that view?
Yes.
Yeah.
Look, I don't
think
it's
because of the color of their skin and because they're the other to the president? Is that what it is?
Jim, I think that's a part of it, without question. I think there's a big piece of this. Look, you walk down the hallways of those CBP facilities, and what you see in the photographs are aspects of the enforcement mechanism to try to secure our border, which is an essential part of CBP job. What you're seeing now is that for folks that are kids, women, families that are claiming asylum, CBP was made for one set of responsibilities, and they're being forced to do something else. That is not to excuse the way that it's being done, but it does mean that the entire system is now failed. And what Trump is doing is trying to heighten that pain and use that as a way to get political concessions rather than trying to solve the problem. And that's the crisis point. And I don't think he would be doing the same thing if he didn't demean and demoralize the people, just as Ayanna said.
But Jim, that's why I'm also saying that the system is, you could say that it's broken, but it's actually doing what it was designed to do. This is about the criminalizing of people that are seeking asylum. I don't want to even remove the word migrant. This is about the criminalizing of families and a policy and a culture that supports the separating of families, mass detention, and mass deportation. And these are not agencies that we should be emboldening because they have proven themselves to be racist and to be rogue.
So when you say not be emboldening them, as you well know, you and 3 other representatives, Representative Omar, Tlaib, and Ocasio-Cortez, voted against this $4+ billion border funding wall. And in an interview that the Speaker of the House did, Nancy Pelosi, with Maureen Dowd in the New York Times yesterday, she commented on all 4 of you and said, all these people, meaning you and your 3 colleagues, have their public whatever in their Twitter world, but they didn't have any following. They're 4 people, and that's how many votes they got. What's your reaction to what the Speaker had to say about you and your 3 colleagues?
Listen, what I'm focused on right now is the mandate that the people that sent me from the Massachusetts 7th sent me to Washington to deliver on. This is an issue of consequence to the country and this district specifically, which is 40% immigrant. And so it is not hyperbole. I'm not being dramatic to talk about the real and palpable fear and the fact that, the families that I met in this detention facility, they are from Guatemala, they are from El Salvador, they are from Honduras. These are the communities represented in the Massachusetts 7th, and they have seen up close and personal the abuses of these agencies. This is a representative democracy. I took a vote that was consistent and in keeping with the district that I represent that has been both most vulnerable to these threats and these attacks because of the demographics of this district, and has been leading in an affront to this from our Suffolk County DA to our Attorney General and to the mayor of Boston. So I was in keeping with that leadership.
Would you have voted no on this funding if you were the deciding vote?
I'm not going to relitigate the past. What I do want to tell you is that I am never the type, because I have legislated and I have governed for a long time, to just throw up my hands and walk away. I sat at the table and worked to improve that House bill to get in protections that were not there around health standards and to offer some metrics of transparency and accountability.
Why are you of no interest in responding to what the Speaker had to say about you and your colleagues?
There'll be plenty of time for that. I will just say that I do not believe that that advances the cause or helps our party or strengthens us going into 2020.
What she said.
Even having this conversation.
Do you agree with what Speaker Pelosi had to say? You have a pretty close relationship with her.
Look, I think her comments that's a question for Speaker Pelosi. I think 100% through the entire Democratic caucus, Jim, 100%. Every single Democrat believes that the system needs to be overhauled, and that change needs to happen immediately. There can be good faith debate about how best to do that, but from folks that voted for that first bill to folks that voted against it, for folks that voted for a second bill that was that was with the Senate version of the bill that was even worse, the people that voted against it. We need to fix this system, and I think voices like Congresswoman Pressley's and others are extremely valuable to that debate.
You voted yes before you went to Texas. Is that not correct?
They're two different bills, two different votes. So I voted yes on the one that you referenced a second ago. When the bill came back from the Senate, which was the Senate version of Bill Mitch McConnell's version, I voted no.
You did.
But Jim, let me just say this. We all take these votes alone. And I would never question the intentions, the rationale for how any member arrives at that vote that they cast, because we take these votes alone.
What are you guys going to do about this? I mean, I hear your comments here, and it's pretty clear how you feel. What can and will the Democrats in the House of Representatives do about these conditions, about these threatened raids? And we've read, by the way, well, everybody goes out of their way, the journalists, to say, well, the raids, if they were to happen, are only directed at people already with deportation orders. But we know there are a ton of people without deportation orders who are scared blankless that they're coming for them. They're not taking their kids to school, to the doctor. What can and will, starting with you, what do you do about this?
Well, I serve on the Oversight and Reform Committee, and in fact, this Friday we'll be having an oversight hearing that I've been advocating for months prior to my visit to the border, and that is regarding the human rights violations and abuses that have been taking place at these facilities, talking about CBP. Listen, this is the largest law enforcement agency, and it has the least amount of transparency and accountability. And furthermore, something that was confirmed for me during this visit is that, these facilities are used as sort of a petri dish. They pilot privacy violations and human rights abuses that are then scaled up in this for-profit industry of mass incarceration.
What can be done besides, in addition to an oversight committee?
Visits to these facilities need to happen. They need to happen across the border, and they need to happen from members of Congress. They need to keep it up. 2, there needs to be a sustained effort to actually address the root causes in the Northern Triangle, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, to try to stabilize the conditions that are forcing migrants to flee.
We're doing the opposite, are we not? Withdrawing funding.
Yes, Trump has actually threatened to do the exact opposite, which is, again, making the circumstance worse. 3, you need to actually make the system work better. You could surge immigration law judges to the border to adjudicate these claims far more quickly, so folks that have a legitimate claim for asylum can get processed and addressed, which, by the way, as the Congressman Pressley referenced, folks that set foot on American soil and claim asylum is 100% legal thing to do. They haven't broken a single law, and that needs to get made very clear to this president and this administration.
One last question before we go. You were sitting in that exact same chair during a congressional debate with the incumbent Michael Capuano, and you said to me that you believed the president at that point had committed impeachable offenses. You only recently said that you believe that impeachment hearings should begin. Why? What changed for you?
So I think, let's be clear, I've had long concerns about behavior of this administration. 2, I had an opportunity over the course of the last several weeks to go through the complete Mueller report, to talk to legal experts, former federal prosecutors, current federal prosecutors, and to make sure that when you come to a conclusion about impeachment, that this is not something that is taken lightly or seriously. I wanted to take the time that was necessary. I'm a former prosecutor. I read through that report, again, talked to some other experts, and I think it's clear that the president has, unfortunately, committed impeachable offenses.
And should be impeached.
And I think the proceedings need to begin.
And should be impeached?
Yeah.
Yes. One last question before you go. How many members of the House of Representatives do you think have actually read the whole Mueller report?
I'm not going to speculate.
I won't speculate on that. I'll just say they're all very dedicated public servants.
Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Okay. Ayanna Pressley, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, too. Congress people. Really appreciate it.